Alex Gold, Cody Tapp, Drew Nixon with you. We'll get to the trash of the day in about 20 minutes. Don't forget, it's also a Fan Club Friday. So the 1 o'clock hour today, Matt Foster from 41 will join us in studio. And one of our listeners that won the fan club experience during the Cody Gold garage sale, Scott, is going to join us. And again, he flew in from Texas.
He did.
For this. That's unbelievable.
He spent hundreds of dollars of his own money and then flew in from Texas, but at least he gets snickerdoodles and brownies as a reward.
That's going to be cool. That's awesome and nice of him, not only to donate to the museum through the garage sale, but that's pretty damn cool that he's willing to fly up here. So we'll try to have a great time in the 1 o'clock hour. Let's keep talking Chiefs football ahead of their preseason game tomorrow. We go out to the Golden Oak Lending phone line and welcome in Joshua Brisco. You guys know you'll hear him on pre and post. Year number 2 for him on the Chiefs radio network. Josh, tomorrow, look, it's preseason game 1. Mahomes is not playing, but I don't know if you agree. We were going through the player or two we're most interested in watching. Other than Cyrus Allen, I said Peter Woods. Where are you at on just the individual player that you're kind of most interested in watching play in a quote-unquote real football game?
I'm going to go pretty far off the board and say Khalil Benson. I just want to know what he looks like against another team, and I also want to see how much the Chiefs play him. I think there's at least a chance that Cyrus Allen is out there for a brief cameo, and we'll have to make a meal out of that for the next week of, the 2 targets that maybe he got. But I really want to see what Benson looks like. I'm sure you guys have covered this a million times now, but he was an undrafted free agent who wasn't even a priority undrafted free agent. He was signed on May 4th after rookie minicamp. I am so intrigued by the fact that the Chiefs pretty much immediately made him the quote-unquote starting right tackle in training camp, and I'm still kind of leaning towards Jalen Moore having that position when week 1 actually gets here, but now with Trey Smith out, they kick him into guard, so I don't know, I have no idea how much we'll see, and I think as Andy Reid said, if we see that first-team offensive line, but I would think that Benson would be the guy to step in at right guard with the first-teamers, and I'd really like to see him kick back to tackle and get some reps there with the second-team offensive line, if that is how it pans out, because if he goes out here and he has a really strong preseason, not just tomorrow, but over however many of these games he shows up in, then maybe there is a real chance that it's going to be a total stunner, at least, where we would have been a few months ago in terms of who the starting right tackle is. And if he goes out there and he looks like, a UDFA who got signed in May, then we'll say, okay, well, there's still some growth to be had here, but it's probably Jalen Moore's job for at least the foreseeable future. So I'm really, really intrigued by him because we've seen some good stuff. We've seen some UDFA reps out there in training camp, but I'm really, really curious to see how much he plays and how he looks when he's out there.
These might be, and this is why I think he's going to play a lot, Brisco, and if you're Veach, you have to make the argument, which is this might be your only chance to evaluate if he is the starting right tackle for you next year. Because if you get lucky and Jalen Moore wins the job and stays healthy the entire year and does okay, well then you might be making the decision between giving Jalen Moore yet another contract or going to the cheaper option and the guy that you clearly like. Like, I think it's obvious. They got veteran guards, and they put him inside at first team before Trey Smith. So they like him, but this might be their only chance to evaluate him this year, unless there's a offensive line injury, which I don't think they want to predict.
And I do think that evaluation portion is why he's gotten so many first-team reps in camp. Like, he wasn't better than Jalen Moore when he showed up. That's not reasonable. That he might have gotten there and gone, wow, we've really liked everything he's shown us kind of at every checkpoint, so we're never going to demote him. And the best-case scenario, it's kind of like a lot of conversations we had about Esapole last year, both early in the preseason, then after the cutdown. He was a Jet for a little bit. He came back around and played real meaningful games. The Esapole thing was similar. Like, well, if you can find yourself either a future starting tackle or even just a reliable swing tackle who is an undrafted free agent who's going to be very, very cheap under team control for the next few years, that's a win if that guy is just helping you hold a roster spot. So any amount of that evaluation, and I agree, I do think we're going to see more of Khalil Benson than we're going to see of other guys who would have been out there with the first team throughout most of camp like he was, because you've just got to see him in some live action. And if the Rams and the Rams 2s and 3s for that matter, if they're able to kind of get him on his heels a little bit and maybe you start to see some of the things that let him slide out of the draft, no harm, no foul. I think you know who Jalen Moore is. If Khalil Benson has a really impressive camp or a really impressive preseason, specifically on Saturday, then yeah, you get to the next phase. In some ways, this is kind of a stretch, I suppose, but in some ways, it's kind of how I felt about Patrick Mahomes' rehab all offseason. It's like, well, look, I'm not going to say that he's going to look like his absolute top-level self when week 1 gets here, but let's take this portion of the offseason. Let's take OTAs, and then let's take minicamp, and then let's take training camp, kind of one step at a time. Mahomes has obviously cleared all of those checkpoints in his rehab, and it seems like Khalil Benson has checked pretty much all of those checkpoints just in terms of earning a very, very serious look as a potential starter.
We're talking to Joshua Brisco here on 96.5 The Fan. Who do you feel like needs the nice performance, the big day tomorrow? I think Jalen Royals is the obvious answer. Is there anybody else?
Jalen Royals is the obvious answer, so fine, you can take the obvious one off the table. Just because I do think it seems like he did the last couple of training camps. You guys were obviously out there. The last couple practices seemed like they were a lot better for him.
It was, yeah.
I will circle Esapole again because I don't think he's in roster danger, but it's just interesting that he's been kind of demoted off of that top line of the swing tackle or the potential backup of the future. And then this is all still in the trenches on the offensive side. There are probably 10 more answers too. But you mentioning Khalil Benson getting the first look at guard, that's not a great sign for Hunter Norzad or Mike Caliendo. So I think they're in a position right now where, again, I'm not sure that they're on the roster bubble truly at this point, but they can't feel super comfortable, especially being jumped over that way. And then I would say any tight end has a tremendous amount to gain in this preseason. If that's Jake Brenningstool, if it's Jared Wiley, who I know, he was a relatively high kind of mid-round draft pick just a few years ago, but you're really looking to see if any of those guys can not only have reasonable snaps to take for you this season, but they never made an aggressive move for a blocking first tight end. There's no Will Dissly on this roster. So if Jake Brenningstool just goes out there and he has some really clean blocks in the run game, I think that would go a long way for him as well.
What do you make, I guess, of the defensive line this year? Alex and I were just talking about it. I had said a few months ago I felt like higher on it than others, only because maybe I thought it was going to be significantly improved from last year. But the way they're talking about Peter Woods and just more depth in Gelati and R. Mason and Omar Norman-Lott at some point, hopefully, coming back this year, what do you, I guess, make of their defensive line? How much better do you think it can be? All of that.
I love where the defensive tackle room is at right now, and that is with the asterisk on Omar, where I think when we were talking about him much earlier in the offseason, there was, kind of the circle around training camp. I think Veach at some point said that he thought he'd be back for camp, and that, I'm paraphrasing, maybe misquoting, and also, you just sort of say stuff like that, and again, it's just about the timeline to actually get ready. So right now, it is a little bit concerning that I don't know who this team's fourth defensive tackle will be when week 1 actually gets here, but 1 through 3 is so good right now. Chris Jones is obviously a future Hall of Famer. Kairos Tonga, we've talked about plenty of this offseason just in terms of getting you a really upgraded kind of nose one tech type of player who can eat a couple of blocks on first and second down. I'm really excited for what he's going to mean for Chris Jones. And then it's 3rd and 8 and you want Chris Jones and Peter Woods side by side. I don't know that there's an interior offensive line anywhere in the league that's ready for that. Not that Peter Woods is instantly going to be Aaron Donald, like Tyrann Mathieu said. I'm also definitely misquoting him. But I think there's a reason there's so much excitement around Woods. I think that it's something that we've seen at camp where he just looks like he belongs. He looks like an NFL player. He looks like he's looking around at his peers, even when his peers are Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith. So I'm really excited for the interior there, even though you need Omar to come back at some point or to find somebody else who can kind of round out that room. And it's the second year in a row, at least, of kind of thinking, well, the defensive end group, I understand the best case scenario. I also see that if there's another injury or a nick or a bruise here or there, that all of a sudden, Ashton Gelati missing a couple of practices puts Felix Anudike-Uzomah on the one line. And R. Mason Thomas, I believe in the ceiling of, but are you ready? And is Steve Spagnuolo ready to put him directly in the line of fire against the Denver Broncos for a large portion of snaps? I don't know. And then obviously they weren't in love with any fifth defensive ends on the roster because they brought back Emmanuel Ogbah. And I think that's fine to kind of make sure that there is a floor for you defensively, but he's not coming off of a good year. It's why he was still available to be signed in August. And he's not going to determine if the pass rush is good or great. He might be able to give you a few reps that, again, can kind of stabilize some things. But a healthy year from George Karlaftis, I think, will end up making his 2026 season much more exciting than his 2025. When he was just playing through a lot there, it seemed. But it's still pretty thin. You either need a big jump from Ashton Gelati, a big jump from Felix, or a really, really competent start to the rookie season from R. Mason Thomas. I don't think any of those guys can do it, but at least one of them absolutely has to.
Is Felix Anudike-Uzomah the leader in the clubhouse of contract years undefeated? I think he actually made an effort to improve his career this offseason, and I wouldn't say that about every offseason of his career in the sense that And I don't mean he's going to have 9 sacks. I mean those final years of players we've seen eventually leave Kansas City on the defensive line that get 4.5 or 5 and find a paycheck. Yeah. Do you think he's capable of that?
Yeah, I think so, and I think he'll have the opportunity for that. So I do think that opportunity and some of the things that you saw that made him a fringe first-round pick and some of the glimpses that he has shown on the field. It's not all projection. We're not just looking at K-State highlights to kind of make that work. There have been a couple of moments, and it's just they're all so long ago because he wasn't out there last season that it is easy to kind of file some of those away. But I think it's fascinating that his roster spot this year, either by necessity or by choice, his roster spot this year seemed safer all of training camp than it felt last year before his injury, because he was kind of on that bubble and you had some more names that you knew were going to be ahead of him in the pecking order, and now there just aren't guys in front of him, not that many at least. So I do think that one of those kind of like 4.5 sack type of years where maybe he's out there in a couple of pass rushing situations and he just wins a little quicker, or he is the recipient of a good rep from George Karlaftis or Chris Jones, he could extend his career, certainly, and he could even extend it in Kansas City. It's not like he's been, some sort of headache or that there's been any sort of issues with him in the locker room or anything like that. There was no argument for picking up his 5th-year option as that cycled through, and if he becomes a Spags guy this season, whatever that definition may be, then I could see him being here for a couple more years. It's not going to be a huge payday, but if he can just be a contributor, again, I think the Emmanuel Ogbah signing is another reminder that the Chiefs need more contributors at defensive end. R. Mason Thomas is kind of a swing for the fences. George Karlaftis is a definite starter. Ashton Gelati, if he becomes Mike Dana over the course of his career, you're going to feel pretty good about it. FAU is kind of a mystery box, and this year will be absolutely fascinating and an incredible contract year opportunity for him, and one that he needs to take advantage of to keep his NFL career kind of afloat where he wants it to be.
We're talking to Joshua Brisco. You guys, of course, will hear him tomorrow pre and post for the Chiefs Radio Network. Preseason game number 1. Pre-game coverage starts at 2, and of course kickoff at 3 here on 96.5 The Fan. What about the return game, Josh? I mean, it feels like Nico Remigio essentially has kind of just been given that job again. We just had him on the show yesterday. He talked about the details being very important for them. We all know the holding calls that brought back even a couple of the nicer returns that he had. How do you feel about the return game here where it's basically his job, and then I guess they're working in Brashard Smith a little bit?
Yeah, I really think that it's like one of the more underrated, interesting stories of where this team is now, which also might just be a reflection of the kind of sickness that we all have with the preseason beginning tomorrow. And I really think, let's have a good 10-minute conversation about the return game. But it is really interesting to me, and I think, again, you guys have been out there, you talked to Nico, you heard Dave Tobe. The way that everybody speaks about it, it sounds like it is Nico's job to be the punt returner and then one of the 2 in kick return. I understand why that happened. I think Nico Remigio is a professional kick returner, punt returner in a way that's important. Like, in a way that, not to dig up old wounds, but Sky Moore was a guy that Dave Tobe loved the physical tools of, and he ended up leaving Kansas City and then having some more success in the return game. But he just gave you a disastrous stretch that really impacts the entire team. And you can't have a disaster in the return game, and Nico Remigio is not going to give you disasters. He also doesn't have the physical tools, the explosion, the top-end speed of a Brashard Smith. So I have wanted that to be a little bit more of a true competition throughout camp, and I'd love to see Brashard Smith put some really good returns together through the preseason, because I think his ceiling is higher in terms of what he could provide as a game breaker, as a playmaker in the return game. But I also understand Dave Toub looking around and saying, hey, so do you guys want to go through the will he catch it, will he not game again in 2026? No one wants to be on that roller coaster. So I really do understand why Nico has so much favor from Toub and from the team. He's earned that. I do really like, though, the idea of Brashard Smith, especially in the kick returns, being back there with Nico and having a chance to break one.
I guess and that's the part of it that I think bothers me, is that Dave Toub has a very good reputation in the league, and they have pretty regularly been a very good special teams unit. I guess I should put Dave Toub in the outlier category, kind of like the rest of the Chiefs. They've been so good at winning and consistently doing these things, and there's no complaints. And last year, maybe just everything fell apart, or did he just not adjust? He guessed on what he thought the league would do in the kick return game and guessed wrong.
Right, that's one of the biggest rule changes the NFL has seen in the last few years, the continuing evolution of what kick returns look like. And yeah, to your point, I think Dave Toub for a very long time was just the first name that you would hear if people were talking about the best special teams coordinators in football, and they have not had one of the best special teams units in football over these last couple of seasons. Now that extends to Harrison Butker's issues, and Matt Araiza last year started to kind of put even more things together, so he's I think on the right track. But I would love to find maybe it's a little more creativity in the return game, and maybe that's just a code word for speed. Maybe that's why I just went with Brashard Smith, is that you can get more creative when you have those high-end tools. But then also the issues that I think Gold mentioned a second ago of the holds last year, and the number of times where if the return lasted longer than 3.5 seconds, you were looking around for a flag to figure out what it was going to come back for, and that just can't happen. I don't know. I always kind of go back and forth on this. Where I can't say that a coach was the one holding a gunner. It wasn't Dave Toub getting flagged for the hold. But then also when some of your core special teamers are the ones continually getting penalized, you've got to do something different there to get rid of those negative plays. Again, I think the argument for Nico Remigio is no negative plays. If that's your strategy, though, the rest of your unit also has to be on board that way. So I wouldn't mind a little bit of I don't want to say riskier way of going about things, because the most important thing is to get the ball back into the hands of Patrick Mahomes and let the offense start rolling. But this is also a team these last couple of years that could have really used some more special teams fireworks. And I think last year was probably the best example of that. Of going, man, if this was going the other way, if we were starting in plus field position, if we had a little bit more electricity out of this return, be it a kick or a punt return, it really could have helped jumpstart some things. So I really do think it's a really interesting place to be in, and I know Toub is very interested to see what it looks like tomorrow, because it's a time when he can finally really evaluate these guys against, another team and not just the same crew in St. Joe over and over and over again.
Before we let you get out of here, Brisco's announced the Royals and Red Sox are going to play in the Field of Dreams game next year if baseball happens.
Yeah.
Dun, dun, dun. Is there a football equivalent you'd like to see?
Oh, wow. I've been to the Field of Dreams field many years ago, and I have weird blanks in my filmography. I love movies, but there's just a bunch I haven't seen that people are always like, "How have you not seen movie X?" I've seen Field of Dreams a million times. That's very exciting. I didn't see that until just now, so that's pretty cool. I'm happy to hear that. On the football side, I don't know. I mean, I guess you could kind of go Friday Night Lights and try to kind of lean into the best of high school football and try to bring that aesthetic to it. You probably can't use the field from The Dark Knight Rises. I think that was thoroughly destroyed by the time that scene was done. Is there one that has
pretty
been
bleak what happened in the program? Probably don't want to revisit that,
No. Oh, okay. I have my answer that I guarantee nobody else has said yet. My favorite. Oh God, this is right up my alley. It took me a second, but now I'm so excited thinking about this. So one of my favorite video games of all time is NFL Street 2. I think it genuinely, fundamentally shaped how I watch football and the kind of players that I love and the wacky violence of that game. One of the fields, though, is called the Sportsplex, and it's a walled-in football field over top of a baseball field.
That's what you
much
want?
like the old Oakland days. Put put an NFL game, maybe move the walls even, but I kind of miss, I wouldn't miss playing on it, certainly. I kind of miss watching football games played on a baseball field. So I think I'd go that direction. Let me pick a couple of levels from NFL Street 2, and that's where I'm going to put the Chiefs for Week 1, 2028.
Joshua Brisco, again, pre- and post-game for the Chiefs Radio Network starting tomorrow, 2 o'clock here on 96.5 The Fan. Appreciate it, man. We'll be checking in, I think, pretty much every week starting here pretty soon.
I'm ready for it, fellas. Appreciate you.
There you go, Joshua Brisco.